Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're going to wait for everybody to stream in, and we'll get the show on the road very shortly. How's everybody doing? You can use the chat to converse with us and with everybody else. And then if you do have a Q&A, a question that comes up that we can answer later, you can go ahead and type that into the Q&A portion of the UI. So yeah, and if you want to say in the chat where you're coming from while we're waiting for people to stream in, please go ahead. We'd love to hear where you're hailing from. Ooh, nice. We got Brooklyn. We got Lowell, Massachusetts. Nice. I'm hailing from Chicago. I think we're getting an okay group here. I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I'm going to move us forward. So welcome to the Kanopy Cinema Series Q&A session for Werner Herzog, Radical Dreamer. If you didn't know, on Kanopy, we are previewing this film from February 5th through 9th. So that's Monday through Friday. You can watch it free, no charge, on Kanopy through your institution. And then today, of course, we have the director Q&A. I'd like to introduce who we have on panel with us. So everybody, I'd like you to meet, of course, the director of Radical Dreamer, Thomas von Steinecker, and the moderator and author from TCM Underground, Millie DeShirko. Welcome, everybody.
Hello. Hi.
All right, and then just before we start and get going with the conversation between Thomas and Millie, we do want to just do some programming notes to let everybody know that this is part of a series. So this is part of Kanopy Cinema Series. It's a regular monthly series where we invite you, the audience, to directly connect with famous directors and famous experts on the subjects of a given film. So you can see for the next 4 months, we have films locked in until May. So of course, we're starting out right now with our spring 2024 opener, Werner Herzog, Radical Dreamer. Next month, to think on women's reproductive health and women's history, we're going to be screening Plan C, which covers activists and volunteers who cross straight lines to deliver and dispense medical kits and other types of contraceptives to women in need. And then in April, we do have Canary, which is a fascinating tale about what they're calling the closest living thing to Indiana Jones. It's about a glaciologist who basically has studied the ice cores in tropical regions in the top 20,000 feet above in tropical regions where there's still remaining glaciers for at least the next couple of decades, we're hoping. That's going to be in celebration of Earth Day and a commemoration of Earth Month and climate change. And then finally, what we've got going on is in May, we're going to be covering Exclusion U, which talks about despite Ivy Leagues having lots of money coming in and coming into their coffers, they're still being quite exclusionary in terms of their practices and in terms of opening up things to a wider audience. So it does touch on Ivy League admissions. It should be a very interesting subject. And that should close out May. So we do have other films coming up. But if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, about the films as they come up, you can visit lib.kanopy.com/cinema series. You can learn more and you can register for future events over there. So again, that's lib.kanopy.com/cinema series. But without further ado, I would love to introduce, actually play a quick trailer just to jog our memories about what film we're discussing, Werner Herzog, Radical Dreamer. And then after that, I'm going to hand it off to Millie and to Thomas to start the discussion.
That's me. That's my landscape.
Has searched every corner of the world and collected some of the most rapturous dreams.
Werner's work makes things possible that would not otherwise be possible. There's something about him that is so hypnotic.
Moving a ship across a mountain. What? That's fresh. That's Werner Herzog.
Stones are raining from the sky. They tumble.
Wer hat das schon geschafft, dass seinen ureigenen Akzent erfunden hat, den die Welt dann auch mag und nachmacht und komisch findet?
Well, I believe that he could eat his shoe.
That sounds like it probably is true. Is it true?
Inszeniert das Event, alle Leute auf das Floß und dann runter den Fluss. Let's see what happens.
His life. You know, it's like you bit into like an exquisitely sour and sweet fruit that you never tasted before.
That's it.
There was one difficulty after the other. Lack of money, technical problems. We had 2 plane crashes.
I live my life or I end my life with this project.
My existence is a meaning. I'm trying to do a story where I know it is deep inside all of us. I just try to remain a good soldier. I mean, a good soldier of cinema.
Where's the source of that?
I don't want to know where it comes from.
Apologies if the lag on that video was a little rough. Hopefully it does jog our memory in terms of what we've seen so far. I would like to hand it over to Millie and to Thomas now, who's going to have a great discussion.
That's me. That's right.
More time. All right. Sorry. Give me a second. There we go. All right. That's where we need to be. I would like to hand it off to Thomas and Millie to please chat about the film, and I will be around if you need me. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Hey, Thomas, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Just fine. I just wanted to first and foremost congratulate you on this amazing documentary. I think it's just really special, and can't wait for people to watch it. So I wanted to kind of start out asking you, like, when did you first discover the films of Werner Herzog? Or maybe if you remember the first film that you ever saw of his?
Yeah, I was like, I think I was like 13 or 14. And back then in Germany, in West Germany, we only had 3 programs. And you just had to watch what was there. And one night I happened to watch TV as a teenager, and they showed Agire, Wrath of God. And of course, I was hoping for something else. I don't know what, but I wasn't prepared at all for this kind of film. And I was in a positive shock, as it were, because there was Klaus Kinski. I've never seen Klaus Kinski before. That was weird. Then the story is just unlike anything I've heard before. And what shocked me most was, I think, the style, how it was directed, because it was shot like a documentary and not like a feature film.
Right.
And in a way, it to me it seemed like not perfect or really bad, as it were, like a B movie, because there were like mistakes in it. Sometimes the picture was blurred, but because it has such a documentary style. But on the other hand, it was so direct and raw, and that it stayed with me since then. And since then, I knew I had to watch for 2 things, Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski. And it happened that these 2 had this very special story.
Yeah.
So it was my first encounter. And then as important as that was, like 2 or 3 years later, I discovered his journal, Walking in Ice.
Yeah.
And that impressed me as much as Aguirre, because here again, it was such an unbelievable story. And I think not only the language was so special, but the whole story, which even turned out to be true, that was shocking. So
Yeah.
then I can't say I was a fan, but I was hooked. I knew I had to watch this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get back to, well, we're probably gonna go back to that question of sort of maybe the mythology of Werner that kind of was presented to us as young people getting into film. But I wanted to ask first, when did you decide that you wanted to maybe make a documentary about him, and what was it like approaching him for that ask?
Oh, that requires a long answer. You prepared?
I'm
Yeah.
prepared. I'm sure everybody would love to hear the answer.
Well, it's of course why or how, when did I decide to make a documentary on Werner? It was like everyone was telling me, or first of all, he has this reputation of being detached, like from Germany, since he lives in LA. You can't really get close to him, and he has this enigmatic reputation. You can't really decipher him. You don't know who he is and what he really thinks, and he has this stone face somehow, yeah. And then, of course, everybody was telling me, or rumor had it, that he was unapproachable and he will turn down every film project. And of course, that made me even more wanting to do this film. So somehow going for the impossible and going for the enigma of Werner Herzog in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think since he lives in LA, like he comes to Germany once a year, and like 5 or 6 years ago, that was the first time I approached him during I think he won an award in Munich or something like that, and I briefly talked to him, and once again I didn't really know what to make of that, because sometimes you get a feeling who this person is in front of you, but I couldn't really get a feeling, and that even once again I really wanted to get a sense of him as a character. So that's the maybe that's the answer to your first question. The second question was why
First
did
question was
I-
what drew you to want to make a documentary about him, and then what was it like to approach him to do it?
Okay, so first, Mission Impossible, so I wanted to go for that. And second, what was it like? Yeah, it was difficult, because it was even more difficult because it was the pandemic.
Oh
And
yeah.
of course, you couldn't just fly to LA from Germany. So I thought, since this is impossible and in vain, why not just writing an email to his office, which is online homepage. You can go to his homepage and write to his office, which turned out to be just one person, his brother, Lucky.
Oh, wow.
His agent and manager. And I just wrote a letter, pretty much telling him the story of why I'm fascinated by his films, and also I come from the same area. I also grew up close to the valley where he grew up, close to the Austrian border, so I know all the mountains that he climbed, and I I told him this kind of personal story, and I thought, okay, he will never answer that, but at least I tried. And then just the next day, Luki called and wanted to know more. And I think during that conversation, we found a connection. And what's important is that he realized that it wasn't a superficial interest in something sensational or in getting into private details or anything like that, but being interested in his work, in Werner's work, films. And then I think we talked like 2 or 3 times, and after that he said, okay, for me it's okay. I trust you. I think you will be able to do a documentary on Werner, but of course it's all up to Werner. And I know that my heart started beating faster because, of course, Werner has this reputation of being a little bit like Kinski, you know. You all of a sudden he will. That's what I imagined, starting yelling at you or just hanging up. Or
Yeah.
you don't know what happens, because that was all in my imagination. And I think that's the typical Werner cliche people have, especially in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my advantage was the pandemic, I think, because then again I sat down and wrote a letter to him. And since most of all, I'm a writer, I'm a novelist, not so much a filmmaker. And I enclosed 2 of my novels, and also told him that he as a writer is really important for me. And then we agreed on a date for a Skype call, and was really nervous before the Skype talk. I mean, I've been a filmmaker for 15 years now, but I think I've never been that nervous before an interview. And like from the first second, all my being nervous went away, and he was like the sweetest person. And we talked like for 90 minutes, and he wasn't really interested in my approach or in my ideas of the cast or anything, but he wanted to talk first about my novels, and that he happened to have read somehow, or at least looked into them, and then about literature. And we found out that we like the same obscure authors, like crazy German authors from the 17th century that was typical for Werner, that got mad and lived in a tower for the rest of their lives and wrote this weird poems. And we found out that we loved these authors. Friedrich Hölderlin, if anyone wants to look him up, really difficult German poetry. Yeah, and after that, I think, of course, then we talked a little bit about the project, but I think he knew that somehow, in a way, we were kindred spirits concerning literature. And that was the most important part for him. Not so much the project itself, but me as a person. And I think that gives you an idea of his approach to filmmaking as well. He's interested in the person right in front of him. Werner's never superficial, or he will never do anything just to be liked or to flatter you or anything. But he gets down to down to the substance from the first minute. Yeah. So
really.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
oh, totally.
That's how it
was. It's fascinating. So you mentioned though that you're essentially from the same area where he's from,
Yeah,
and the beginning of the documentary is him being, I guess, in his hometown or traveling with him. What was it like to be there with him? And knowing that he doesn't come back to Germany very often these days.
yeah, like once a year, because his
Yeah.
foundation has this weekend in Munich once a year, I think in October or November, and that's when he
Mhm.
comes. You mean the room with the fireplace?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's actually a hut on the top of a mountain where he went as a kid, and me as well.
Oh, wow.
First, he sits outside of the hut, and then he's inside next to a fireplace. And he spent a lot of summers there as a kid.
Mhm.
And me, like 50 years later, went there as a kid as well. So both of us knew this place, and it meant a lot to us. And it was clear to me it had to be this interview had to be in a surrounding where it feels comfortable,
Yeah.
not just like a studio or a hotel, but like that has something to do with his person.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, and I suggested that to him, and he liked that idea a lot. And the interesting part is that it was totally illegal. We were not allowed to film there. And that, of course, was an idea that Werner loved. The minute I
Yeah.
told him that what we're doing here, Werner, is totally illegal, I think that was a great, great thing for him.
Yeah. Um, Maybe related to that, I mean, there's you managed to get his brothers in the documentary, and I know
Yeah.
that one of his brothers is obviously the first person you interacted with because he's kind of
Lucky,
in
yeah.
charge of things. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
what was it like talking to his brothers for the documentary?
It was interesting to see how different they are from him, and at the same
Yeah.
time how much they have in common. I mean, Luki, I think, is the most important person in his life concerning his work, because he made all these things possible. Without Luki, I don't think these films, especially in the 70s, could have happened. And you can see how they complemented each other. Also, when I met the two of them and they sat next to each other, I mean, this relationship they have, it's really fascinating and also touching. I mean, the whole story of these three brothers growing up only with their mother in this valley. I thought that that's like from a German fairy tale, an old fairy
Mhm.
tale, yeah, in this remote valley in the woods, surrounded by mountains. You can't invent the story.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's
it's perfect.
once again, it's really, really touching. I mean, this mother having literally nothing to raise these kids, that's very impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. Um, you have a couple of really great, well, you have a lot of great interviews, obviously, in the documentary. I I particularly liked the interviews that you had with Wim Wenders and Volker Schlondorf, who, alongside Werner, were part of the kind of German New Wave movement. Um,
Mhm.
as a German filmmaker, were you influenced at all by any of these films? Were you around and kind of, or what was it like being a German filmmaker, kind of being in front of these types of movies that they were making?
Yeah. I pretty much grew up with Wim Wenders films, because Wim Wenders, he's uh, much more, how do you say, the present in Germany than, for example, Werner.
Yeah.
He's doing commercials, and he's in a lot of juries, and doing a lot of interviews, and Also, like Wings of Desire or Paris, Texas, these were really important films for me as a teenager and also later on. And also he as a person, he's I mean, you get a really good sense, I think, of him as a person. He's very, I mean, the way he speaks about Werner is really sweet. Yeah, and
Oh, absolutely.
he's a very
Yeah.
sweet person. So yeah, and of course I'm not, I wouldn't compare myself at all with these giants of movie history. I'm just doing most of the time TV documentaries. So that's a totally different kind of work and style as well. So as characters and the way they're thinking and the images they invented, that's what was really important to me and a lot of others in Germany as well. But as a filmmaker, I think I come from a whole different area that's not comparable to these. What they do is really high art and great, counts to the greatest achievements of film history. And I'm just doing regular
Yeah.
TV work, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, it was actually very sweet to hear both of them, both Volker and Wim, kind of talk about Werner and just be kind of reverent towards him, which I thought was great. It kind of knowing that they were all kind of in the same period of filmmaking was really nice
no competition at all. It was really
Yeah.
surprising because you would think, okay, these are three old guys and they will tell you that I'm the greatest and Werner is great as well, but I'm the greatest. That's what you would expect. But all of a sudden you realize, okay, right from the beginning, they were working on the same project in a way. And although being totally different, they had so much in common and they respected each other. They respect each other really a lot. And especially Volker Schlöndorff and Werner, I think they're really close friends. Yeah, and once again, that's very touching.
Yeah. Well, and obviously we saw in the trailer you got some great interviews with, an assortment of Werner's collaborators and sort of admirers of his, from Nicole Kidman and Chloe Zhao and Joshua Oppenheimer, who's really great in your documentary. I think he has amazing things to say. And even like Christian Bale. Was there a list of people that you knew you kind of wanted to approach when you were in, maybe pre-production, or was there maybe somebody that you wanted to get but couldn't get?
Yeah, to me, to be honest, it was important to talk to the people who were closest to him during his work, like longtime collaborators, like Thomas Mauch was really important to me.
Yeah.
And of course, Luki. I think these two were the most important people on my list in the first place. And then, of course, you're very happy when you get someone like Christian Bale or Nicole Kidman, of course. And but with all respect, these are not close collaborators. They just collaborated on one project with Werner, but it's interesting that they come from a totally different world in a way, different country, different time, and having these two worlds combined, like this his German career, Thomas Mauch, Luki, Wim Wenders, and his American career, Christian Bale, and what have you. I mean, this shows you the range of his influence and the variety of people he left an impression on. And you ask about who I wanted to get, and it's kind of sad, but in the end, we had so many great people for the film that maybe would have been too much, but like we always talked to Mick Jagger, and he agreed to give us an interview very early on, and then he had COVID, and then he went on tour, I think. It was really difficult, as you can imagine. And then after Picture Lock, I think it was the day of Picture Lock or the next day, his management called and said, "Okay, we can do the interview with him in 2 weeks." But it was absolutely impossible to include him in the film, and that was a pity, because I would have been really interested in what he had to say about Fitzcarraldo, and
Yeah.
I mean, he as well is a very fascinating guy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Maybe this is a good segue into this, to, you know, Fitzcarraldo being a good segue into this question that I had, or this this bit of the documentary that I thought was actually really touching. There's a scene in the documentary where Werner pulls out this journal that he kept while he was shooting Fitzcarraldo. And he notices that the writing is really small in it. And at some point, he kind of maybe he feels like it was indicative of his kind of mental state at the time of that shoot, and that maybe it was like in the moment he had kind of realized that he had maybe not processed a lot of that trauma of that shoot, right? Because there's obviously Fitzcarraldo being a very historically like difficult movie and a lot of mythology behind it. But I was wondering for you, what was it like filming that with him, sort of in that moment with him going, oh, this is, you know, something from this, you know, shoot that was just kind of hard and difficult.
Well, I mean, you can see, I think, one page of this diary and the story behind it in My Best Fiend. And then, of course, parts of it are published under the title, I think in English, it's Conquest of the Useless. And it's a really great journal, really great book. And of course, it was clear that at one point I really had to ask him about this legendary journal with the small microscopic handwriting. And I thought, okay, I just like approaching him in the first place. I thought, okay, I just ask him, but of course, he will say that it was impossible to show this journal. But it was at the very end of my time with him, and I think at that time he knew that he could trust me, and he felt comfortable, and he was instantly like, okay, I will ask Lena to go to the bank and get it out of the safe. And I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Then we went to his office in his house, and of course it was a great moment because he was so open about it. It was really surprising. He just showed me like every page, and then I think since Werner is someone who doesn't really talk about what's going on inside of him, either because he doesn't feel too comfortable or he just wants to move on. You can see that also in the scene where I ask him on the set of Even Dwarfs Started Small, whether this place brings back good memories or bad memories, and he answers with, well, just memories. I did good battle here, and that's that. Okay. But it's really hard to know what's going on inside of him emotionally. And I think having him with this journal from Fitzcarraldo, it was a very special moment. Not only because his office is really small and you could sense what was going on inside of him, but I could really see. I mean, you only see like 1 minute of the whole scene in the film, but we spent like 1 hour 90 minutes with him. Yeah, 1 hour or 90 minutes, and you could see how he got caught up in his memories, and that he was like fighting not going back there again, because it as you can imagine, it was a great but also very, very hard and also negative experience. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you could see that, and he just started to talk about the time, and then at some point he just closed the journal and, well, like, I did good battle and that's that, and let's move on. So I think that tells you a lot about him as a character.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so at some point, I, I maybe in the 1990s, I think that's what was mentioned in the documentary. Werner moved to LA
Yeah, 95.
and 95, and he still lives there, right? But there's this great scene where he takes you to this place called the Museum of Jurassic Technology,
Yeah.
which is this very specific museum in LA that has a very deeply interesting story behind it. I used to live in LA and I went there many
Okay.
times. Yeah. So I wondered if you could talk about that, filming that scene for a bit. Like, had you been there before? Have you heard of it before you went with him?
No idea. I've been to LA before, but as you can imagine, only very briefly.
Yeah.
And yeah, actually, I think it was during that first Skype call when I asked him, okay, what are your favorite places in LA? Maybe we can go there. And he was like, okay, I don't really like LA. And okay, there's this one place, Museum of Jurassic Technology. Okay, well, I mean, of all places in LA, that's his favorite place. I mean, that also tells you a lot about him. And then, of course, I had no idea what this place was and the strange name. And then I looked it up on the homepage as well. It's like it sounds like it was made up, or
Yeah.
it's too good to be true or something. What you don't have an idea what expects you there. You just see this house, this tiny house, and what's inside of this house. Yeah, so I think we spent like 2 weeks in LA, and a couple of days of preparations before we started filming with Vern. And together with my cameraman, we just went there to get an idea. And I mean, it's tiny. I think it was
Yeah.
a nightmare for the guy who with the camera to be there.
Dark in there too, I bet.
Dark
Yeah.
and tiny, and you really have to be careful how to move. But in the end, as you can see in the film, it turned out really nicely. And I think we did like, it was, I mean, it was a really tough shoot, because you can't really make a mistake here with the light and with how you move. Until we got it right, it took like 3 or 4 takes, where Werner tells the story about this made up couple with the singer and the yeah, in Brazil.
Sauna Bend. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and but he was totally fine doing this like 3 or 4 times over and over again. So it was really, really important to him, and he got really into that. I mean, I think it's a shame that he himself didn't uh, make a film on this place. And also, the guy who runs the place is really quite a character.
Yeah. Yeah. It was exciting to see him be so activated by being there. And then of course when he mentioned it being his favorite place, it's like completely tracks, as you said, that he would love that place so much. But I know we have some Q&A questions coming up, but I wanted to kind of ask you a couple more things before we turn it over. So I think it's in the interview with Christian Bale in the documentary. He talks about how, he, I think, also had this kind of preconceived notion about Werner being this like notorious wild man,
Yeah.
you know, but that actually he was one of the most gentle people he had ever known.
Yeah.
And I just was curious because, you know, you said something to the effect of that, obviously, before you approached Werner to do the documentary. And I mean, again, I think I had that notion as well before watching your documentary. And then I watched it and got this sense that, you know, there is such a gentleness there. And he seems to be very connected to the natural world, which I thought was really great. And so, I mean, I guess my question is like, do you think that there is sort of this maybe false mythology around him that makes him seem that he's like more chaotic than he actually is?
I think he's very honest, and being honest means that when you dislike someone for whatever reason, you will just walk away, maybe without telling him or her why you don't like him or her. And I think some people will take offense with that, or think that Werner is a choleric, or something is not right because he's so honest. And also he's acting on instinct, yeah, very instinctively. And that's something you're not used to in a world that usually is determined by business, or where you learn to be polite to get something from people in order to get something, or and I think, yeah, that's where this reputation comes from. And it's not, I think with Kinski, he was a bit maybe mad or schizophrenic or something. He was really a mad guy, but he was also an actor, also in real life. But you and you don't have this with Werner. He's a deeply honest guy, I think, and that's, as I said, we're not used to that in our civilization, to honest people.
Yeah. Yeah,
And that's what
certainly.
makes him so remarkable.
Yeah. That's what I think the function of the documentary is brilliant at, is just kind of being able to kind of like dig beyond that reputation or you know, mythology, and just kind of see, yeah, he seems like a very pure and honest person.
Yeah.
And you really show that in the documentary, which I think is great. I guess maybe, yeah, one more question before we do a Q&A. I mean, like, maybe to this exact point that we're talking about, he seems to persist. He has this staying power in the culture, you know, and you show a lot of, you know, like his work, his later documentary work, but also being on The Simpsons, and, you know, he's done a lot of voiceover work, and he seems to just continue to resonate with young people. And, you know, what do you think he, you know, what do you think that he's doing, or why do you think he has the staying power?
Good question. As with all great artists, I'm careful with the word genius. I wouldn't use the word genius, but he's obviously he's a great artist. He managed to create images and thoughts that are timeless in a way, and without limits, without being too much rooted in Germany, that only German people will understand his work, but that somehow they have a universal appeal. But where this comes from, I don't know. I mean, like I think Josh Oppenheimer says that when he talks about Aguirre, it's the opening scene of Aguirre. It's something you think that had always been there, and uh, that's most of the time that's an evidence for great art, that you don't know what's happening, but you realize, okay, that's that was meant to be, or this just had to be it. Yeah.
Yeah, we never lived without it
Yeah.
somehow. Yeah. Um, actually, Lion, I have one more question before we turn to Q&A.
Okay.
I want to talk about the term radical dreamer and why you
Yeah, okay.
decided to name the documentary that.
Because to me, at the very beginning, to me, Werner is radical in his approach and in his films, and he's a dreamer in a way, because he has this dream sequences in his films, and he in a way he does the impossible, like in Fitzcarraldo. And then I know that, like on the last day of shooting, I was like, I just go ahead and ask him, Werner, would you agree you're a radical dreamer? And he was like, I'm a, I'm not radical and I'm not a dreamer. I thought, okay, I won't include that in my film, but that's interesting that he him for himself, it's just a matter of fact. There's nothing extraordinary about anything that happens to him. And also his saying is, do the doable. And first I thought it was like, do the undoable. Yeah, because that, in my opinion, that fit better to the image I had of Werner. But I think it tells you a lot that his mojo in a way is, do the doable. I mean,
Yeah.
that's so. Once again, he's very honest about himself, and yeah, in his point of view, there's nothing extraordinary about himself.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, sorry, you popped up and then I had to
No
had to
problem.
ask the last question. So
No, that was worth it.
apologies.
I'm not radical. I'm not a dreamer. That's just fantastic. So I didn't know how you wanted to do this. If you'd like to read off the questions, or I can read off the questions, Millie, either way. But I'm gonna share my screen again, and we're gonna get to the questions that were asked beforehand. And so these are user submitted questions from the registration form. Let's make sure that we are looking at this properly.
Yeah, why don't you can read them off since you're manning the slides.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. Looks like we are back to here. All right. So yeah, in the interest of time, we have consolidated a few of the repeated questions. I see that there's one question that came out just recently. We're going to try to get to that if we can. I think it's a pretty pertinent question for the discussion today, but let's kind of get into this. Not exactly rapid fire, but we do have about 10 questions we're trying to get through. So I'm going to start off with, how was this experience as a documentary film, different from other documentaries you've worked on, Thomas, and what was the hardest part of it?
Yeah, it was different from other documentaries because this was a documentary on a filmmaker, and one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, in my point of view. And how do you direct a film on such a great filmmaker without competing with his images, or without trying to surpass his images? Or I think that was really hard to decide what kind of visual look I wanted for this film. And of course, it was clear that I didn't want to do a Werner Herzog film on Werner Herzog, not Herzog style, but in my own style in a way, and being humble not trying to surpass his images, but like building a ramp for his images, like to stay in the imagery of my own film, building a ramp, and Werner could jump off on his skis and fly away. Yeah, so maybe that's the image I wanted to do in my documentary. And I know that some people said, okay, that's not a very radical approach, and how does that fit? Because Werner is so radical. But I think the approach had to be that trying to tell the gist of his story and his biography, and showing building the frame for his extraordinary work. So that was my approach, and that was hard because, of course, not trying to get too egoistic in this film in a way, but staying humble.
Yeah, that seems like it was a tough balance to really strike. You did a very good job at that, by the way. But
thank you.
Yeah, that seems like it would be difficult, especially with Herzog himself. Speaking of, how much input into the film did Herzog have?
Yeah. He didn't interfere at all, and I think you can see that during the workshop, that he always tries to like activate the potential of his students, but not he doesn't ask them to become little Werners in a way. Yeah. So he didn't interfere at all with the documentary, but we agreed on two things in the very beginning: no private stories, nothing about his ex-wives or so, because I wasn't interested in that, and that doesn't tell you anything about his films, and that was about his work and not so much about his private life. And also, I was interested in that, and I sensed that it was really important to him as well, that he's not only featured as a filmmaker, but as a writer, because these two things are equally important to him. And I think being a writer became more and more important to him in the recent years.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do have another one though. Kind of dovetails into that. So, what is Werner Herzog's attitude towards his own cinematic legacy? So, is he active in the preservation of his filmography, or do you get a sense of any of that?
Yeah, he has this Werner Herzog Foundation in Munich, that not only gives an award to great filmmakers, or like Chloe Zhao received an award, the Werner Herzog Award in Munich, and he went to Oktoberfest with her, which is a great story. But okay, I leave that out. But he's of course, I think it started in the past 5 or 6 years, or maybe 10 years, that he started to think, how can I preserve the films and make them available for as many people as possible. I think Wim Wenders started that like 20 years ago, and I think Werner doesn't like to think too much about his legacy, and of course, thinking about his legacy means thinking about death and not being able to make films. And I think he's not too comfortable with that idea. He likes to, as every great filmmaker, he likes to go on making films, which is understandable. So I think that's a tough part for him, but that's I don't know. You have to ask himself about that.
No, but those are some really interesting insights there. On the next question, Werner Herzog has said that his films are his journey and his writings are his home. How do you map this idea onto his works?
Yeah, he has these great slogans. I think that's one of his secrets, that he's really good with these slogans. Yeah, as I said, I think, and I also think it's true for him. These two things, writing and making films, are equally important. And I think in the end, he as a writer is as important as he as a filmmaker. But in the end, of course, everyone, when one hears Werner Herzog, you will immediately think of his films in the first place, and then of him as a writer, which is not fair but understandable. And I think, and I hope my film motivates people to read his books as well, because they're really worthwhile reading.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to kind of get through a couple more of these. When do you come to understand or to be able to convey ecstatic, or when have you been able to understand or to be able to convey what Werner would say ecstatic truth in your work and in others?
Yeah, ecstatic truth, that's a complex concept, I think, but a key concept for Werner's work. I think I tried to explain what it means in a small part, and Joshua Oppenheimer does a great job in explaining what ecstatic truth is. Yeah, I think that's very Werner-like. I wouldn't claim that in my work I do anything like ecstatic truth. I leave that to Werner.
That's fair. Just, I think we have 2 or 3 more here. What was the first film you watched and made you want to be a filmmaker?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, because I only do documentaries and not feature films.
That is fair.
And it just, I never went to a film school or anything. It just happened to me. And I just found out by coincidence, in a way, that I love doing films. So that's how it happened. What was the first film? Yeah, okay. Okay, next question.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to get to a live question that we had that was just asked about 5 minutes ago. So here it is. How long did it take for you to be where you wanted to be, or where you wanted to be in your career? So
yeah,
that's a trick one.
That's okay. That's a question concerning my own work, I think. Yeah, I mean, I started writing, and I wanted to be a writer very early on, like with 10 or so. And my first novel got published with 30, so it took me 20 years. But that's relative, considering when I started.
It's always a journey, I'm sure. Okay, so I do have this live question here. It's a little bit of a long one, so bear with me here. Why do you think Herzog, compared to his contemporaries of New German cinema, has arisen as the most popular? I adore his films, but he certainly has a less distinct worldview compared to someone like Fassbinder. I think that could be an interesting take. This can be a death blow to even great directors, i.e. Denis Hopper in America, who has, as a director, has fallen out of public consciousness. So I think the question is, how do you think he's arisen as the most popular?
Most popular German filmmaker, or?
I think maybe out of the new German cinema.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think Fassbinder is very rooted in Western German society, post-war Western German society. And if you're not familiar with that, you can admire his style, but you won't be able to understand his topics and his ideas completely. So he's a filmmaker's filmmaker in a way, I think. You can admire his style, but he's very hard to grasp for people outside of Germany, even for Eastern German people who grew up in a totally different society. Right from the beginning, and you can see that in my documentary, I think Werner's topics and his interests were not rooted in Germany and not rooted in the Nouvelle Vague, as with Volker Schlöndorff, and not rooted so much in American cinema as with Wim Wenders.
Right.
In a way, he had not the regular idols that you might expect from a filmmaker. And then again, his idols are writers. And that's what makes him so special, but also maybe universal in his appeal.
Yeah, I was going to say he seems to have a universal appeal for sure. So I did want to actually just say thank you, everybody, for joining. That was the end of our questions. We are just about 2 minutes over time, so I apologize if we're holding you. But thank you so much for coming to the series.
Thank you.
We're going to have a recording of this to anybody who registered. But yes, come back, check out live.canopy.com/cinema series to check out other events that we're having. But thank you so much again today for giving us your time. This was such an insightful conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.